Let's start with Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Let's uh, let's chant little Radha now. Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha. Krish. We are reading Bhagwat Geeta as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We are in chapter 5, text 7. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Let's read the purport. One who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being. Yes, and every living being is dear to him. This is due to his Krishna consciousness. Such a person cannot think of any living being as separate from Krishna, just as the leaves and branches of a tree are not separate from the tree. He knows very well that by pouring water on the root of the tree, the water will be distributed to all the leaves and branches, or by supplying food to the stomach, the energy is automatically distributed throughout the body. Because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all. Oh, I think we already read 7, right? You're supposed to start with 8 and 9. Let's read it too. Because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all. He is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by this work, by his work, he is pure in consciousness. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his senses are controlled, where did I lost it? Sorry, I lost it. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there is no chance of his being deviated from Krishna. Nor is there a chance that he will engage his senses in matters other than the service of Lord. He does not like to hear anything except topics related to Krishna. He does not like to eat anything which is not offered to Krishna. And he does not wish to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. Therefore, his senses are controlled. A man of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. One may ask, why then was Arjun offensive in battle to others? Wasn't he in Krishna consciousness? Arjun was only superficially offensive because, as has already been explained in second chapter, all the assembled persons on the battlefield would continue to live individually as the soul cannot be slain. So spiritually, no one was killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Only their dresses were changed by the order of Krishna, who was personally present. Therefore, Arjun, while fighting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, was not really fighting at all. He was simply carrying out the orders of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. Such a person is never entangled in the reactions of work. Let's read text 8 and 9 together. It has been given together. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that the only material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. So he has made himself aloof from the senses. Let's read the purport. A person in Krishna consciousness is pure in his existence, and consequently, he has nothing to do with any work which depends upon five immediate and remote causes. Causes are the doer, the work, the situation, the endeavor, endeavor means the effort, and fortune. This is because he is engaged in the loving transcendental service of Krishna. Although he appears although he appears to be acting with his body and senses, he is always conscious of his actual position, which is spiritual engagement. In material consciousness, the senses are engaged in sense gratification, but in Krishna consciousness, the senses are engaged in the satisfaction of Krishna's senses. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is always free, even though he appears to be engaged in the affairs of the senses. Activities such as seeing and hearing are actions of the senses meant for receiving knowledge, whereas moving, speaking, evacuating, etc. are actions of the senses meant for work. A Krishna conscious person is never affected by the actions of the senses. He cannot perform any act except in the service of the Lord because he knows that he is the eternal servitor of the Lord. Let's read text 10. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is affected by sinful action as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Let's read the purport. Here, Brahmani, means in Krishna consciousness. The material world is a sum total manifestation of three modes of material nature, technically called the pradhana. The Vedic hymns Sarvam He Itad Brahma Mandukya Upanishad 2 Tasmad Itad Brahma Nama Rupam Anam Cha Jayate Mundaka Upanishad 1.2.10 and in the Bhagwat Geeta 14.3 Mama Yunir Mahad Brahma indicate that everything in the material world is a manifestation of Brahman. And although the effects are differently manifested, they are non-different from the cause. In the Eshopanishad, it is said that everything is related to the Supreme Brahman or Krishna, and thus everything belongs to him only. One who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna and that he is the proprietor of everything and that therefore everything is engaged in the service of the Lord naturally has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether virtuous or sinful. Even one's material body, being a gift of the God, for carrying out a particular type of action can be engaged in Krishna consciousness. It is then beyond contamination by sinful reactions, exactly as the lotus leaf, though remaining in the water, is not wet. The Lord also says in the Gita 3.30, Mai Sarvani Karmani Sanyasaha. Resign all works unto me. Me means Krishna. The conclusion is that a person without Krishna consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses. But a person is in Krishna consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and should therefore be engaged in the service of Krishna. Let's read text 11. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. Let's read the purport. When one acts in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, any action, whether of the body, mind, intelligence, or even the senses, is it the senses, is purified of material contamination. There are no material reactions resulting from the activities of a Krishna conscious person. Therefore, purified activities, which are generally called sad achara, can be easily performed by acting in Krishna consciousness. Sri Rupa Goswami, in his Rasamrit Sindhu 1.2.187, describes this as follows. It is in quotes, a person acting in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, in the service of Krishna, with his body, mind, intelligence, and words, is a liberated person, even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so called material activities. Quotes close. He has no false ego, for he does not believe that he is in this material body or that he possesses the body. He knows that he is not this body and that this body does not belong to him. He himself belongs to Krishna and the body too belongs to Krishna. When he applies everything produced of the body, mind, intelligence, words, life, wealth, etc., whatever he may have within his possession to Krishna's service, he is at once dovetailed with Krishna. He is one with Krishna and is devoid of the false ego, and that leads one to believe that he is the body, etc. This is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. Let's read text 12. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all the activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Yeah, this is the same thing that we read, but given in a different way. The previous one we spoke was about the sannyasi who is abandoning everything so that he can purify his senses. And now we are looking at how what is the false ego, the ego that gets attached to the fruits or the results of the activities that we do every day. Let's read the purport. The difference between a person in Krishna consciousness and a person in bodily consciousness is that the former is attached to the Krishna, whereas the latter is attached to the results of his activities. The person who is attached to Krishna and works for him only is certainly a liberated person, and he has no anxiety over the results of his work. In the Bhagavatam, the cause of anxiety over the result of an activity is explained as being one's functioning in the conception of the duality, that is, without knowledge of the absolute truth. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. In Krishna consciousness, there is no duality. All that exists is a product of Krishna's energy, and Krishna is all good. Therefore, activities in Krishna consciousness are on the absolute plane, they are transcendental, and they have no material effect. One is therefore filled with peace in Krishna consciousness. But one who is entangled in profit calculation for sense gratification cannot have that peace. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Realization that there is no existence beside Krishna is besides Krishna is the platform of peace and fearlessness. Let's read text 13. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of nine gates. Nine gates. City of nine gates. Okay. The material body. One second. So he's trying to say that our body has nine gates. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of nine gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. Let's read the purport. This should be interesting. The embodied soul lives in the city of nine gates. The activities of the body, or the figurative city of body, are conducted automatically by its particular modes of nature. The soul, although subjecting himself to the conditions of the body, can be beyond those conditions if he so desires. Owing only to forgetfulness of his superior nature, he identifies with the material body and therefore suffers. By Krishna consciousness, he can revive his real position and thus come out of his embodiment. Okay. Therefore, when one takes to Krishna consciousness, one at once becomes completely aloof from bodily activities. In such a controlled life, in which his deliberations are changed, he lives happily within the city of nine gates. The nine gates are mentioned as follows. So let's understand what are these nine gates. Open quotes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is living within the body of living entity, is the controller of all living entities all over the universe. The body consists of nine gates, which is two eyes, two nostrils, two ears, one mouth, the anus, and the genitals. The living entity is in his conditioned stage, identifies himself with the body, but when he identifies himself with the Lord within himself, he becomes just as free as the Lord, even while in the body. Therefore, a Krishna conscious person is free from both the outer and inner activities of material body. Let's read text 14. The embedded spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Right. Let's read the purport. The living entity, as will be explained in the seventh chapter, is one of the energies or natures of the Supreme Lord, but is distinct from matter, which is another nature called inferior of the Lord. Somehow, the superior nature, the living entity, has been in contact with the material nature since time immemorial. The temporary body or material dwelling place which he obtains is the cause of varieties of activities and their resultant reactions. Living in such a conditional atmosphere, one suffers the results of the activities of the body by identifying himself in ignorance with his body, with the body. So you start identifying yourself that you are the body. It is ignorance because from time immemorial, that is the cause of bodily suffering and distress. As soon as the living entity becomes aloof from the activities of the body, he becomes free from the reactions as well. As long as he is in the city of the body, he appears to be the master of it. But actually, he is neither its proprietor nor controller of its actions and reactions. He is simply in the midst of the material ocean struggling for existence. The waves of the ocean are tossing him, and he has no control over them. His best solution is to get out of the water by transcendental Krishna consciousness that alone will save him from all the turmoil. I think we can do text 15 and then we will close. Let's read text 15. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Let's read the purport. The Sanskrit word Vibhu means the Supreme Lord, who is full of unlimited knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation. He is always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity bewildered by ignorance desires to be put into the certain conditions of life, and thereby this chain of action and reaction begins. A living entity is by superior nature full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is Vibhu or omniscient, but the living entity is Anu or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. And so, when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires. But the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which he may be desired. Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma or the super soul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul, as one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desires as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to Him and be eternally happy. The Vedic hymns therefore declare the Lord, in quotes, the Lord engages the living entity in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities so that he may go to hell. Quotes close. The living entity, quotes open, the living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, can go to heaven or hell as a cloud is driven by the air. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position of service to the Lord and is thus entrapped by nescience. And under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. हम भगवान को दोष देते हैं कि भगवान की वजह से मेरी ये हाल है या भगवान की वजह से मुझे ये हो गया है. लेकिन we are experiencing the things which have resulted out of our own desires, which we don't understand, and we just blame it on the God. The Vedanta Sutras 2.1.34 also confirm this. In quotes, the Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, though he appears to. Let's end here with Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Bolega? बोलेंगे Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.